Hello, Car Store here again. It's been about a month since I've done any videos for UV layout, and I thought I would show off something here that a friend of mine let me use. She was creating this very interesting Celtic knot design, and it's meant to be the headpiece to a staff. And she had some questions about unwrapping the UVs in her program, and I thought I'd give it a whirl in UV layout. So what we're seeing here is what she sent me. So these are the cuts that she's already made, and you can see that UV layout is showing off quite a bit of distortion in here. If we switch over to the UV view, there's the UVs as they currently exist. So got a very wide mix here of distortions, some UVs here that are too big, many that are too small, and that's pretty typical in a design like this. If we just jump back to the 3D view, when you've got tight curves like this, the inside curve here is probably going to be a red distortion. It's going to be compressed. And the outside curve is likely to be a blue distortion. It's going to be stretched as it tries to move around that wider curve. So that's what we've got right now. So I decided to give this my own little treatment. So let's open this up again. And this time I'm going to use new. So we're not going to edit the existing, we'll replace them. And we'll start fresh. Now the interesting thing here is that it does come to a single point, and that is, well, it's not causing problems per se, but it definitely makes unwrapping a little bit interesting. So what we'll do for starters is we'll just cut that right off the bat, and we'll put a seam along here as well and drop that to the UV view. So that'll flatten out quite nicely, and what we're left with when you get right down to it is just a cylinder. Admittedly a lot of kinks and curves in here, but it's a tube, like a cylinder. So like a cylinder, technically all we need is one more seam. So I did a Shift C there, and UV layout was able to follow that one seam all the way through down to the other end here. So I'll press enter to commit that cut so it splits it open. We'll drop that to the UV view, and let's flatten these things. And here comes the fun one. Now I'm going to start with the bloat flatten, but I will not let it finish. And the reason why for that is all these curves are going to make this quite the nightmare for bloat flatten to work on. But you'll see it in action briefly, and you'll see what I mean. But I will stop it before it completes its full calculation. And you're going to quickly see it's starting to fold in on itself a lot as it tries to process this. And if we left it and allowed it to think for the full duration, it would probably unwrap itself in time. But we just don't have enough time to wait for that. So I'm going to hit space to stop that. And then I'm going to hit R, which is the rectangle tool. So since we've basically got a tube here and it has 4 distinct corners, the rectangle tool instantly flattens it out. But it does not really do a good job with the distortion. So we still have a lot of stretching here in the UV tiles. And of course the other really big problem is it crosses over, well, more than 7 UV tiles. So that's really not efficient at all. Let's just take a quick look here in the 3D view, and I'll hit the T key for texture. And so you can see these UVs are definitely stretching in ways we do not like. So what are we going to do about this? We're not filling the UV space very efficiently, obviously. So let's do a Shift I. Shift I is just going to undo the black edging here that the rectangle tool uses. If you'll recall from past videos, all that really is ensuring that the marked edge is parallel with the U or V direction. So it really basically just forced it into this square rectangle shape. What we will use is the snap tool. I haven't talked about this yet, and I will go into a deeper discussion with it in a future video. In fact, it was going to be my next video until this one came along. So what the snapping tool does is allows you to snap your UV shells to a given coordinate. So if I press the space in the middle mouse button right now, everything moves around in a very fluid, distinctly non-snapping manner. And that's because these buttons here are saying do not snap. Do not snap in the U or the V directions. These two buttons here will snap to the leftmost edge of the grid coordinate. These two buttons in the middle snap to the middle of the U and V coordinates. And right now the coordinates are 16 by 16. And as you might expect, these two here snap to the rightmost edge of the coordinates. I usually use the middle, but let's try the left on this one. So as soon as I turn those buttons on, we've got a 16 by 16. You see the grid appear here in the UV view. And now when I use the space bar and the middle mouse button, you can see that it snaps to the left edge. If we turn this on to the middle, it's a similar sort of behavior. And the right is also pretty similar. It's actually mainly due to this lower resolution. We can make this a finer grained snapping. We can kick this up actually quite a bit. It even goes to 256. Unless you had a really detailed model with lots and lots of UV shells, lots of small pieces, you really wouldn't need this kind of fine granularity. And so in this case, let's just leave it at 64. And I will let this snap right to that edge there. And what we can do is cut along here. More or less. Cut there. And I'm going to actually speed up the video at this point. You probably get a pretty good idea of where this is headed. Okay, so now we will pack these and we will show the shell bleeds. We'll have a bleed of 2 and we'll pack all. And it gives us an 85% tile coverage. So that's pretty good. The only problem being we still have a lot of this distortion in here. But this is going to be nice and easy to paint on. Whatever you're doing with the design, whether it's maybe a nice wood grain or maybe make it metal, you can paint on this. And even with the distortion, it shouldn't be too bad if you use procedural texturing in your 3D program, and most 3D programs I can think of support that. And you can bake out the procedural texturing onto this UV map, and so it doesn't really bother too much with the distortions at all. However, we can do bloat flattening. Now, of course, bloat flattening, if we come in here and use the flattening brush, the B key, it's going to try to remove the distortion, but we're not getting that nice, easy to paint on rectangle, because we want to be altering the position of the polygons in order to get rid of this distortion. So I am going to bloat flatten everything, and we will try this again. We'll see what kind of coverage we get with that. I will pause the recording while this happens. No need for you to waste your time watching all that bloat flattening happen. So I'll be back in a few minutes and we'll see what our results are. Alright, that took about 3 minutes. And all in all, it roughly kept the rectangular shapes. Didn't get rid of all the distortion, obviously. And we did get some rather nasty twisting here. And this is exactly where we want to use the eye tool. If we just mark that edge there with an eye, it will take this black area here and force it to be parallel with the UV directions. So let's do a Shift F on that, and you can see it's trying to force that shape here, and it's leading to some pretty interesting difficulties. Let's press space on that, and a Shift I to get rid of that, and then the brush flattening kind of cleans that up, at least a little bit. So, where do we go from here? Let's pack again. And we have 69.5%. So we lost quite a few, about 11 percentage points of UV coverage there because of this rather odd shape that really hasn't helped us with all of our distortion. So what is the cause of that? Well, we'll come back to the 3D view for that answer. We've made one seam along this edge. And we could, in theory, make another seam along here. So I will do exactly that and do a Shift C. So now instead of flattening out the entire tube, we've basically got two halves here. And okay, so it cut along there. So let's press enter to commit that. And it just hit me. It's only going to cut that one segment because it reaches this point here and stops going. So we're going to have to follow this thing along. So we'll do a Shift C there. And that goes all the way along to here. And it also looks like we're not right exactly on this edge either, so that's not really a problem, but kind of an annoyance. It would have been better if we were over one edge. We'll follow that around with our eyes. Comes into here. Looks like it's going to get stopped here. So I am going to mark these polys with the G key. Press H and hide marked. And zoom in a little bit. Yep, and there's that edge again. So Shift C. Does that continue? I don't think it did. Yeah, we're going to have to mark a bit more. Hide marked. There we go. Now we can see it. We'll do a Shift C. And there, that continued that edge. Where did it stop now? This is a kind of a hunt and peck game we've got going. Well, we can go back to the UV view, make our cuts along the pieces that we have. There we go, we got that one. Okay, and there's where we hid our polygons. So I can press the H key for hide and U for undo, and that returns those polygons to view. So we probably still need to cut along one of these edges here. Let's go back to the 3D view. Let's see. Yeah, this is one of our uncut pieces. So let's follow that. There's another one. We follow that around here. Where does that go? Ah, there it is. A little bit of searching. This is a pretty complicated model, all things considered. So Shift C along there. Comes through and stops there. So Shift C. And that's going to stop here, I think. Yep, there it is. And we're still not all the way there. This should be our last segment here, I think. Yep, down to the end. Okay, so let's cut these. This one. And that one. Now I'm going to pause the video again, and we will bloat flatten all of these. Alright, so that took quite a few minutes, about 6 minutes total, and I've rerun the pack, and you can see we're down to a 34% coverage. So definitely not ideal. The only really good thing about this is it's gotten rid of a lot of distortion. There's still some in really tightly twisting areas, but all in all, the distortion is not bad at all. So let's take a look in 3D view. So there you can see some pinching here in this particular bit of twisting. And then also up here it looks like to be pretty bad, but certainly better than when we started. So The real downside to this is, of course, we don't have great UV coverage, and it's going to be quite a bit harder to hand paint on these. But if you are using procedural texturing and baking that out to the UV map, that might not be a problem for you. But those are basically your two options. But the only way we're going to neaten this up is by introducing even more seams. So I think if we cut along here and maybe cut through here, basically anywhere where there's some tight twisting and distortion, if we introduce more seams there, we might get some better flattening, less distortion, and it might pack a little bit better, but it's going to be really hard because of all these odd shapes, as opposed to keeping them as rectangles. Allows us to, allows UV layout to pack the space a whole lot more efficiently. So we press R again on just a couple of these. You can see that it very quickly introduces the distortion again. So there's really no two ways about it. It's a question of trade-off. You as the artist, what you are willing to accept versus what is best for the final image. If it's something that's going to be seen from a great distance away, and you're not going to notice any distortion, that's fine. But if you're going to be zoomed in really close and it's going to be a very important detail in your scene, you'll definitely want less distortion so that the texturing looks its very best. So there we have it. There's your two options. As always, it's a question of trade-off. Seams versus and bloat flattening versus rectangle flattening versus the amount of distortion that you're willing to accept in your model. Thanks a lot. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. I am going to do another video. We will look at the snapping in greater depth. We'll also look at stacking. I touched on that very briefly when I did the copy UVs video. So we'll take another look at both of those features, as well as the boxing and locking features. Those are pretty cool and useful as well. So that'll be a future video, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. Thanks a lot. I hope you like this video and you've subscribed to the channel. Bye for now.